Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. Today we're diving into part 2 of my recommendations for characters from The Residence, my book recommendations for them. I'll link part 1 in the cards up above in case you missed that one. Over there we talked about the investigators. Today we're going to be talking about the first family. So if you missed my little rundown from part 1, The Residence is a TV show where a murder happens in the White House during a state dinner, and we have this kind of quirky detective who comes in to solve it, and there's this wild cast of characters. And in this particular episode, we're going to be talking about that first family group, the president, and the people directly associated with him. And we'll dive in first with the president himself, Perry Morgan. He's a character who we're presented in the show as kind of unpopular. He's not particularly well liked by either side now that he's in office, and he's, in addition to politically unpopular, he's also kind of personally unpopular within the White House. Lots of people don't really care for him. He's kind of unpleasant and very focused on himself, but also clearly has the sense that, like, he's got the right of it, that it's sort of his way or the highway, and that he knows the way that he should be living, and that he thinks other people should kind of follow along with that, or at least be willing to, like, do what they have to appease him so that he can live the way that he wants to. And he also has a brother in the White House who we'll talk about in a little bit, who is very, very different from him. So there's this kind of ongoing conflict between the two of them. And for that reason, I think I want to recommend Perry, The Duel by Anton Chekhov. This is a story about these two men with opposing philosophies of life. Laevsky, who thinks he should be allowed to do kind of whatever he wants. He's in this position where he's got a fairly stable job as a civil servant. He's living with this woman who's not his wife, who's actually the wife of another man. The two of them ran away together, and now he wants to leave her, and he feels like he should be able to just kind of drop everything and run and, like, do whatever he wants. And then you have Von Koren, who has this very strict sense of, like, social norms and the obligations we have to other people, and it's about the conflict between the two of them, and specifically that Von Koren, because of his belief that it's sort of his way or the highway, that he's got the right of it, he's the person with the best philosophy of life between the two of them, he challenges Laevsky to a duel. And the story is really not so much about the duel itself, but about the conflict between the two men and the ways that the different people around them react to the duel, the ways that people try to talk them out of it, the situations that arise as a result of the challenge between the two of them, and also ultimately about the, I want to say, sort of bitter end of the duel, the things that play out after the duel has occurred, the ways that Von Koren and Laevsky feel about what transpired between them, where there's, I'm not going to say this book has a happy ending, it very much doesn't, but they both have to kind of reflect on their behavior up to the duel and why things played out the way they did. So it's very much like a character study of these two men and the philosophies that they individually have. And so I feel like Perry should read this, because I think Von Koren gets left with a very bittersweet feeling at the end of the book, and I think it's, like, Perry's approach to life, he needs to kind of think about that, like, how does his philosophy of life affect the people around him. Up next we have Elliot Morgan, who is Perry's husband. He's the first man, and he is, or the first gentleman, I guess is the correct term, and he's just kind of almost a non-entity in the household. He's this kind of quiet, soft-spoken, very just, like, people-pleasing kind of dude. He's not particularly likely to stand up for himself. He gets kind of trod on by everybody around him, and he just gets the short end of the stick a lot of the time. But he's in this position where, like, his husband is in power, but he is really lacking in power, or he feels like he's having to live up to some expectation from the people around him. And I think that he should read The Ivory Key by Akshay Raman. Specifically, I think that he would connect some with the struggles that one of our 4 characters, Vera, goes through. Now, this was a book I didn't actually care for all that much. I thought it was okay. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars. But I did really like Vera in this story. She is the new Maharani of this place. She's technically in power herself, but it's really feeling like her mother, despite being dead, is still in power. She feels kind of second best to her mother, and, like, everybody's expecting her to behave the way that her mother would. So there's all these expectations around her to be the kind of person that her mother was. But that's just not the kind of person that she is. And so a lot of her story is about her grappling with those expectations and finding her voice in the midst of everything going on in this very difficult situation. I think he would connect with Vera, and I think it would be positive for him to see the way that Vera kind of comes into her own, because I think that's something that he doesn't really fully do throughout the course of the show. He still feels like he's quite on the fringes of the cast by the end. But again, I think he would just benefit from the idea of not necessarily being the person other people expect you to be, or trying to be anything other than like specifically who you are. Because it feels a lot of the time like he's not sure, he's indecisive, he doesn't really know what people expect him to do, or he feels like he's got to kind of equivocate. And I think that it would be good for him to see somebody kind of come into their own and not continue to equivocate to other people. Next up, we have that brother I mentioned, Trip Morgan. He's a chaos man. He's a gremlin. He's an alcoholic. He's constantly like drunk or high. He's a bit of a kleptomaniac. He's destructive. He's this kind of terrible person, and he's really unaware of the impact that he has on other people, and it doesn't really click for him that anything is wrong until it starts to threaten his own like way of life. And so for him, I want to recommend Soichi by Junji Ito, which is about a wildly unpleasant middle schooler, and I think Trip Morgan is just a lot like Soichi. Ultimately, a lot of what he does is not necessarily totally harmful, but it's unpleasant. Nobody really likes him, and I think that's kind of what you get with Soichi too, where he's just doing these pranks that he thinks are funny. He's harassing other people to entertain himself, and he does kind of get his comeuppance in the end, just a little bit, and I think that Trip kind of needs to get his comeuppance too. Our penultimate character is Henry Hollinger. He's the president's best friend, and he's sort of an advisor character, and he is a jerk. He's very clearly used to getting what he wants based on his connections to power and on his like position in society, and he thinks he can kind of shout down everybody, that he can just get people to roll over and acquiesce to him if he yells loud enough or if he throws enough money out there. And I think that he needs to read Docile by Cam Spare, partially because he's really unpleasant and I don't like him, and I think you should have to read a book that's really difficult and unpleasant to read, but also because I think about half of the story, if you look not so much at like the broader themes of the story, but sort of at the personal level of it, part of the story is very much about Alex, one of our two main characters, having to come to terms with, not even really having to come to terms with, having the realization that his actions have consequences, that he can't just do whatever he wants and there not be consequences for the way that he treats others, that being able to get people to just acquiesce because of your position in society or the money you have isn't necessarily a good thing in the long term, either for you or for anyone else. And I think that Henry Hollinger, should have to read about Alex dealing with that and trying to like right the wrongs that he has created through his kind of privileged self-righteousness. I do want to say this is a book that's very difficult to read, so maybe don't pick it up if you're not in the right mindset. This one has a trigger warning that contains forthright depictions and discussions of rape, abuse, and other consent violations, as well as attempted suicide and suicidal ideation. Just be forewarned if you decide to pick this one up. Finally, we have my favorite of this group of characters. We have Nan Cox. She is the president's mother-in-law. She's Elliot's mother, and she hates the president, and it's so funny. She's great. She's this, like, chaos lady who's this old woman who barely leaves her room, but boy does she have strong opinions on everyone else, and she occupies this really interesting role where she's kind of in the White House. She's a part of the family, but she doesn't really situate herself as part of the family. She kind of sits on the fringes and observes everyone else and gossips and spends more time with like the butlers and the other people that work in the house than she spends with like the other members of her family. And I just really enjoyed her because she's quite insightful, and she's also just quite mean in a really entertaining way, but in a way that you see her like really cutting to the core of who people are. So for that reason, I think she should read Victorian Psycho by Virginia Fato. This one is about a woman who is occupying this kind of odd space between the aristocrats and the servants of this household because she's a governess, and she's just wildly unpleasant to people. She's weird, she doesn't really care about social norms, and she just does weird things, behaves strangely, but everybody is kind of weird in this household, just like everybody is kind of weird in the residence. And she's sitting in this like interesting position between the different levels of society and using that position to kind of cut straight to the quick of who people are and why they do what they do. And I think Nan Cox would just appreciate her. This one is pretty gory, but I get the sense that she's not very squeamish, so I think she'd get along with it okay. And I think that she would just like how forthright our main character is here, whose name I can't remember. Winifred Naughty. I think she would like how like forthright and unbothered Winifred is. So I think she would just have like a good time reading this. So those are all my recommendations for the first family. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these and what you thought of them. And in our third and final episode, we're going to be talking about the chief usher and the other people who basically run the White House day to day, the people who allow things to run the way that they should. So yeah, that's what we're doing next time, and I hope to see you there. For now, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I hope you consider giving it a like, maybe even subscribing to see what comes next. I'm currently posting at least once a week, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.